I'm really struggling through it. I think I have really good people in my corner, and those people are what's keeping me going right now. I think these people are reminding me that this is like a time in life where like I come first, and that should be enough. Hey everyone.
We're so excited to have you guys back. This last week and honestly month has just been amazing. Hearing y'all's stories, having you guys slide into our DMs. We're super, super thankful. Please continue to subscribe, like, follow, and send it to a friend that you think might find this helpful.
Yeah, I think some of the favorite like comments and messages I've been getting is like, love this, blah, blah, blah. But then they're like, oh, I know someone I want to send this to. And that makes me so happy that people are finding ways to connect within their own like friend circles and communities that they already have. And so I think that's just been like really like heartwarming, and I love hearing that.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Let's dive in. Biz, how's your week?
Week's been good. I had an appointment this morning for pain management. So we went over the medications I'm on. He's also the doctor that I talked to about my anxiety. So we discussed that I'm currently like feeling more anxious than in the past. And so he recommended that we actually switch out my Zoloft for another medication. And so we're going to taper down off the Zoloft and then add in this medication. So I'm actually, I'm curious to see how that will turn out, because Zoloft is kind of the go-to medication I've used for anxiety.
Yeah.
And this new one, which I can't remember the name of it now, but it's a medication that I haven't tried in the past. And so I'm curious to see how that will work out. But overall, I'm hopeful, and I really love that he comes up with alternatives and isn't just like, I mean, we tried like dose adjusting first, and the fact that that's not really doing anything. He proactively will be like, okay, let's try something else. So I'm really I'm grateful. I actually like, that's the type of doctors that I like to have on my team, are people that come up with ideas and solutions and initiate changes. And it's not just me asking for a change or medicine that I've heard of.
I think that that's such a good point. And I'm really glad that your pain management doctor is like that. I think a lot of pain management doctors, it's just like a stressful situation. Yeah. Just due to like obviously like the opioid crisis and whatnot. So I'm so glad that you have a pain management doctor that you trust, that is like in it with you, and his goal is to make you feel better too.
Yeah. And he actually did something really good today, which he was asking me, he said, what are other symptoms you've been having?
Yeah.
And I kind of felt a block, and I was like, can you give me a list of options? Like, I feel like if you say them, like maybe it'll resonate with me. He was like, yeah, of course. He was like, yeah, of course. And he started listing off things, and I was like, oh yeah, I have experience like this, and this. And so that was a nice little tip. If like you're kind of like stuck on like what you've been feeling, just prompt your doctor to be like, can you give me some options of like what are things I could have been feeling?
That's such a good piece of advice, Biz. I feel like I'll go into a doctor's appointment and black out if I don't have someone there with me to like walk me through what my goals were and what we wanted to come out of the appointment. So what a good piece of advice. I'm gonna try that.
It's like sometimes you just want like
options, like
a multiple choice test, and not a like free written essay situation.
Right there with you, sister.
Yeah. How's your week been? That was kind of the highlight of what's been going on with me.
Similar. I decided to increase my depression meds with my primary care doctor. That's who I go to for my like mental health medications. Yeah. And honestly, I've been on the higher dose for like 3 days now, and I'm already feeling a lot better.
Amazing.
I don't think I realized like how blue I was getting, and so being on this higher dose, I'm like, whew, that was a valley that we were sitting in.
I will tell you from my vantage point, you feel a lot different than you did last week, and that makes me so happy. And I'm so glad that you were proactive and talked to your doctor about it. Is this the Wellbutrin that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I was on a lower dose of Wellbutrin, and I just went up to a higher dose, and day 1 I felt like I had a zip in my step again.
That's awesome.
Yeah. The only like side effect I'm getting is like shaky hands. Okay. I'm like, whatever, I'll take shaky hands and happiness, like full send.
Is the shaky hands expected to like dissipate over time, or is that something that will remain?
I think so. I think it'll dissipate over time. I've been at this dose level before, and I don't remember that sticking around.
Good.
Yeah. So
that's awesome. All,
I feel like we've had good weeks. We're taking good proactive steps for our mental health.
Good, yeah.
Last week's episode really was a wake-up call.
I feel like I listened to it and I was like, I have to get my mental health in check.
Me too. Oh my God. Nothing like listening to yourself to become accountable for your
Alex and I basically just send each other the episode and are like, hey, you should listen to this.
This part, we should talk about that. Oh, I love it.
Let's get into what Alex and I wanted to talk about this week, which is identity as a sick chick and what that means to both of us, what that looks like, what the journey has been to get here. And so, Alex, why don't we dive into, for you, like, what was your identity before getting sick?
It was kind of complicated. So I was in second grade when I got diagnosed with arthritis at the time. I would play sports. I was in a bunch of clubs. My friends didn't treat me any differently. So even though I was, using a wheelchair here and there or crutches, random splints or casts, and lots of doctor's appointments and blood work and taking medications daily, I didn't feel like a sick person or that I had a disability at all.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think like when I got older, in college I was taking IV infusions and whatnot, and I still didn't think I was a sick person. I just viewed this part of me as something that was like honestly kind of annoying to deal with.
Okay.
I had frustrations around it, but it didn't, in my opinion, it didn't hinder much.
Okay.
Even though I had teachers and adults that would treat me differently.
Versus your peers.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Are there any like memories that stick out to you as a child of teachers or adults treating you differently?
Yes. So 2 different experiences that I think were kind of pivotal. One was in 6th grade. It was my IT computer teacher. He was one that would like point out to the whole class that I was in a wheelchair and make me feel like I was different, and would like make fun of it / invalidate / be like, you're too young to be sick and have arthritis. You shouldn't be using a wheelchair. You're not disabled. So that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, when people would point it out, it was like a chip on my shoulder. So I had a finance teacher who I very much respected. He was the one that taught like the honors finance division. And when I had my big flare up in college, junior year, he told me, I don't know if investment banking is a good career option for you with your health. And I remember thinking like, fuck you, I can do exactly what I want. This is just this annoyance that I have to deal with, but it doesn't define me, nor does it change my life.
Right.
Which was pretty naive. Like, I mean, I was getting IV infusion. So yeah, it was an impact to my life and my day to day. And my flare-ups were huge and painful and hard to balance in reality with our careers.
I mean, I think there's so many different ways that teacher could have conveyed that to you, which may have even like impacted you going into that career choice, right? But like someone saying it in that manner, just like your gut reaction was like, F off, like I'm going to be able to do this. Yeah, versus like someone sitting down and being like, these are the demands that are going to come with this career. And is that something that you think that you want to willingly enter into? I think you may have had a different reaction.
Absolutely. I think if he had come at it with like concern and compassion,
right,
it would have, maybe I wouldn't have gone into investment banking.
Right.
But I don't like living in what ifs. So,
right.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Oh, well. It is what it is.
It is what it is. I took about 25 years to say I am disabled and I am a sick chick.
Oh,
that's okay. What about you, B? What was like? Who were you before diagnosis?
So I would say for me, so I got diagnosed at the end of February 2023. So taking me back to like January, February of last year, if you would have asked me that question, I would have said, I think I would have listed off like my resume to you. I think I would have said, I'm ex-investment banker. I work in finance. I went to Booth for business school. I went to UT for undergrad. I was a petroleum engineer. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a wife. And I'm a soon-to-be mom. And I think that's kind of where my mindset was like, let me give you all of my accomplishments and then my personal relationships. And for me, like that pivot point was something, to be honest, like it kind of felt like getting into a car accident. Like you're driving and everything's fine. And then all of a sudden you get into an accident and your life is completely different because my diagnosis, like one day I was fine and the next day I was told I have stage 4 cancer. So there wasn't really time to process or understand what was happening. It was really just like being thrown into the fire, and the mental like catch up for me, I think, has taken a lot longer.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I've like fully gotten there. I'm like 15 months or so into this. So I don't know if I like how I think you kind of like really proudly said like you're disabled.
Yeah.
I don't think I feel that way to this day.
I mean,
I don't think I would
it's
say that word
reasonable.
for myself. Yeah.
That feels reasonable with how, like, honestly, how soon you still are to that diagnosis.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're moving through the waves of the catch up because you had to have your like head down, get shit done, fight for your life, which you're still doing.
Right.
But now it's not as new. So where do you feel like what were like the waves that you feel like you've gone through maybe?
Yeah, I think so the first wave was like being in the hospital, right? So I was in the hospital like in continuous care for almost a month. So I think in the beginning it just felt like, okay, like when do I, and this is actually a function of like also like everyone around me constantly, the question was always like, so when does she get discharged? Like when does she get to go home? And
When are you done?
when are you done? Exactly. And so I think that was like the first goalpost was getting out of the hospital. And so that was like checkbox number 1. Like I made it to that point. The next checkbox for me was that, so when I was discharged, I was in a wheelchair using a walker. So the next thing was like, how do I get out of those things and be able to, function on my own without those? And so the next phase was like filled with physical therapy and a lot of pain management and getting through that. And then I would say phase 3 was kind of like the toughest phase because there was no clear goal. And like there was nothing like attainable that I was reaching towards. It was just
if you do A, you get B.
Exactly. And so it was really, I would say that was the difficult part. And I actually remember that summer, Farouk and I took our first trip. We're like, let's go do something fun for ourselves. Like I'm kind of in a stable place. Like like my scans were looking stable. So I was like, okay, like let's go live our lives. Let's do something fun. And so we went to the Hamptons last summer. So I actually remember saying to his friend that we were staying with, I said to her, the cancer doesn't define me. It's not my identity. And I was like, I feel like this is just like a part of me, and this will be something in the back mirror one day. And in the moment, I thought her reaction was like, oh, okay, great. Now reflecting back on it, I think her reaction was probably like, oh, okay, she doesn't quite get it yet.
Like in denial.
And yeah, like a little bit in denial.
Yeah.
And I think even like saying this aloud, it shows me that like I was in denial at that point, that this would be something that would be over soon.
Yeah.
And so I remember that specifically. And then I remember this past February when I had my 1 year anniversary of being diagnosed, I think that's when it actually really kind of hit me that this isn't something that's going to quote unquote be over. There's not a cure to stage 4 cancer. There's no point where you get into remission with stage 4 cancer. The goal essentially with stage 4 is that you get to what they call NED, which is no evidence of disease or no evidence of active disease. And that's kind of the goal. And so for me, I haven't hit that goal.
Right.
And like my scans have shown they're at times stable, but then they show progression other times. And so I haven't gotten to that point.
I mean, Biz, I just like so many questions. I feel like I'm glad that like this is a reflective experience where you can kind of look back and see one, how far you've come. And I think like there's a grieving period when you get diagnosed, and it's, you really honestly do move through like anger, depression, denial, right, acceptance and whatnot. And you are so goal oriented. Like in our last episode, you were talking about how you go to therapy with goals and then you'll stop it. Right. So moving into this space where it's chronic,
right,
and we don't know like what that end of the tunnel looks like is really, really hard. Like that's something that I think all of us probably relate to. Yeah. And that NED stage, I don't know if this translates for you, but NED for autoimmune is like you still have symptoms. Like, right, you're not symptom free. Right. There's no bell you get a ring and say, I did it, I'm done. Right. And living with that like heaviness of, well, this is my life. This is what it looks like. It's hard. And a year into it, like that's still super fresh.
Absolutely. I think I think I'm realizing that because I'm so goal oriented, like that mindset is, it's really difficult to keep that mindset during this diagnosis, like this, yeah, because there isn't an end goal. The end goal is to, stay alive essentially. Mm-hmm. And gosh, like even like saying that sounds crazy, right? Like that's just the goal, is like you just want to be here. Yeah. And yeah, there's no bell. You don't get to ring the bell that you're done with your chemo. Nope. And maybe I'll get my own bell, honestly.
I love that. I think that we should have bells for just, yeah, getting through the next day.
Yeah, like just ring a bell at the end of the day.
I think it also probably is hard because there are some cancers where it's if you do A, B, and C, you get to hit the bell. Yeah. And for you and I, and everyone in our community, there's no equation it's not one size fits all for us. It's, right, we'll see if this one works. We'll see if those holistic things that you're trying work. We'll see. Right. There's no certainty, and you transition into living into the gray. And like, that takes a lot. Literally, it took me 20 years, Biz. Yeah. And I still struggle with it.
Yeah, and I think coming from, like, both of us are very, like, we have very analytical minds, right? Like, yeah, you look at our career choices, like finance, engineering. Like, those are very analytical careers. And then, like, that obviously translates into our personal lives and how we view personal relationships and our thoughts. Yeah. And I think I'm trying to get to the point where to not be so analytical and to not be so like, 2 + 2 = 4. Yeah. And it's really learning to manage the day-to-day, manage the symptoms, and overall have a good quality of life and a quality of what my day and my week looks like, and not just be trying to run after this end goal line. Yeah. Which unfortunately seems to like constantly, it feels like it's constantly moving further and further away from me. Yeah. Like the closer I get to it, the further it gets.
Absolutely. And I think with a chronic illness, that just keeps on happening no matter what. One thing that's really helped me with that mindset shift is like the duality of life, that mm-hmm. I am getting better because my flare-ups look different now. Right. And I'm still chronically sick. I use a wheelchair sometimes, and I go on a walk for an hour every night. Those two truths of I'm getting better, I'm getting towards a different goalpost, I'm going to ring this bell, my personal bell, and I'm still going to be sick. It's a weird mental space to live in. I think it causes a lot of anxiety, a lot of like tension, right, because it's, as you're saying, like we're analytical. It goes against the grain of who we are.
Right. Yeah. And I think to your point, it's like two things can be true at one time. Like I could be feeling okay and I could be chronically ill. Yeah. Like it's not one or the other. And I think for me, it's a lot of like, it's giving myself grace to have those thoughts. And then it's also giving myself grace that it's difficult for me to understand that. And it's going to take time. And do you think time has been the biggest help for you, or what do you think it's been?
Yeah, I think it's time. I think it's doing some like work on my mental health and my like exposure to the community.
Right.
Finding like role models in the space, doing the quantum energy healing, having a talk therapist, and totally time. Like when I look back at my life, I see different chapters of diseases. And what's weird with that is like the mindset shift happened in each of those chapters, where when I was young and described my arthritis as annoyance, that's denial.
Right.
When I was in college and a professor told me, I don't know if you should be an investment banker, that was anger.
Right.
When I got diagnosed with PAN and everything changed for me, that was grief. That was sadness. That was depression.
Right.
And 5 years later, I have a disability placard in my car. I am an ambulatory disability aid user, meaning I use a wheelchair or a cane here and there as needed.
Right.
And I'm no longer embarrassed about those things. And I'm really proud and inspired to be a sick chick now. But that took a really long time to get to it. But I do think, like, honestly, doing this podcast, I think it will get you there because it forces you to reflect and kind of chronicleize. Is that a word? Maybe?
It can be.
Okay.
We'll make it a word.
I like that. Chronicleize your, like, emotional states throughout the last, year and a half, year plus.
Yeah. I think also for me, like, I've always been in the caretaker seat, right? So I've always been like someone who helps someone going through an issue. And so that shift also of being the person who needs caretaking has been difficult for me. And it's actually like, I've actually felt like it's actually very awkward for me to receive care and help from people. It's not something that I welcome with open arms. It's kind of difficult. And I think that's probably also made it difficult for my loved ones, my family to know what to give me, because I'm not super receptive of it. I think I am getting, I would say after the 1 year mark, I'm more open to it. I would say before that, I was more like, I'm good. I can handle it. Like, I just want you guys to come. I can do this on my own. I want you guys to come visit and just like hang out, and we'll go do something fun. I think I'll do the hosting. And I think now I'm more aware of my limitations. I'm more aware of my energy levels. I'm more aware of my pain and the management technique that I need to keep it at bay. Yeah. And so I think that awareness is leading me to be more open to receiving help from people. And I think that's currently where my identity lies. But I think it's interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about when we started this podcast.
Yes.
We were going back and forth on what to name it. And so we had a couple of names in the running. And I remember very clearly that you texted me one day and you said, I got it. And I was like, okay, what is it? And you said the Sick Chicks. And I just remember my visceral reaction to that was like, I'm not a sick chick. Like, I don't want to be called that. And we went back and forth. And so we landed on the not so sick chicks. And so I think that story in itself is very descriptive of like where you and I both are in our journey, is that like you proudly were like, we're the sick chicks. And I was like, let's do not so sick.
Yeah. And I also think it is like it's indicative of like what you were doing at that time too. Like that's when you dove into Joe Dispenza, and that whole realm is, if you say what you are that thing.
Yes.
And so saying you're a sick chick went intuitively to, okay, then I'm sick.
Yeah, then my body will feel like it's sick. And so that's a great point. So like Joe Dispenza is also like, I think around the 1 year mark is when I got into Dr. Joe. And I think that has been so impactful in my journey. I think the stories of transformation, one, I think like if you go to YouTube and you look up some of those stories, it's like it will give you chills what some of these people are sharing of like where they were and where they are now after doing the work to meditate.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, you know, being as I am, I went and got all of his books and I was like, I'm going to read everything and I'm going to make sure that I know how to do everything before I even like do my first meditation. And when I started meditating, it moved me so much and it resonated with me so much. And it was difficult in the beginning because his meditations are long, like 2 hours it's what we're talking about.
It's a gruel.
And so so it's hard to stay in them. But the ones, there's been some meditations I've done that have just like touched me to my core where I'm just like, okay, like I can do this. Like there's like something.
I can make changes in my body.
Yeah, like there's something living in my body that needs to get out.
Yeah.
And that release is what's going to essentially drive my healing. And yeah.
So I did Joe Dispenza last year.
Yeah.
And similarly, I would tell people that was my last flare-up. I'm never having a flare-up again.
Yes.
That is my old chapter.
Right.
And then after having several flare-ups that I tried to say weren't flare-ups, I realized that I can have the duality of truly believing that I am going to get better.
Correct.
To my core, I know I'm going to get better. And also, I am chronically ill. Right. And that is not going to, like, I have lived 30 years chronically ill. So that's going to shift who I am for the rest of my life, no matter what. Even if I'm so much better that the smallest symptoms I don't even think about anymore. Right. And I think that's like the dualistic mind that's uncomfortable to sit in because you don't want one of those things to be wrong.
Right. So, yeah, when I did like 6 weeks of Joe Dispenza daily, and then I had my set of scans back in March, like it was actually quite comical. So I remember being in the room and I was just like, okay, like I know she's going to tell me that I actually didn't. So they put the scans in the portal and I was like, I'm not going to check the portal because I know the scans are going to look amazing. They're going to look like the best they've ever looked. Like I've been meditating every day. Like I've been putting this out there. My body's been feeling this, like even though it hasn't happened yet, my body has been feeling that it's already happened. So we're in the room and then my doctor comes in and she's like, so you've looked at the scans, right? And I was like, no, actually, like, I'm really happy. I'm like, no, I actually haven't looked at them yet. And I'm just waiting for her to be like, I've never seen this before. Like, it's like your cancer is completely gone. I don't see, like, this is a miracle. And she was like, yeah, so we're seeing progression. And I remember, I just blacked out because that wasn't what I was expecting. But it was funny because I thought, 6 weeks of Joe Dispenza every day is going to heal me and cure me. That being said, I could have left that and been like, this isn't working. I'm never going to meditate again. But my takeaway was not that. It was like, I have more work to do. And it's time to, put my head down and keep going.
I think that is you sitting in the dualism then. Like, that is huge, B.
Yeah.
Huge. To hold both truths at the same time.
Yeah. And like, I just have to keep putting in the work, and it's going to happen eventually. It's not, I don't think 6 weeks was the right amount of time to think that I have, fixed whatever is going on in my body. And it'll take time, and I'll keep putting in the work, and I'll keep trying, and I'll, have good days and bad days, but I'm going to keep trying.
I think what that boils down to is like you have hope still, regardless. Yeah. And when I think about everything that we've said so far about our sick chick identity, that underlying foundation of hope is the catalyst for us having that dualism thinking that we can get better and we are also chronically sick. Hope does amazing things.
I also think like viewing chronic illness, cancer, autoimmune as a marathon versus a race, I think is really something to keep top of mind, is that it's not a race. You can't just like run towards that end line and think you'll be done. Like, it's a marathon. There's going to be miles that you're running that you're like doing amazing, and there's going to be miles that you're like, I'm not going to get to the end. Yeah. But the point is to keep going and keep pushing through, and understanding that not every day and not every week will look the same, and not every milestone will be achieved, but you have to keep going to achieve that final milestone.
100%. Find your mantra, find what gives you hope, and cling on to it, because healing's not linear. There's ups and downs. And those downs can be really, really hard.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think what nicely pivots into that then is what the effect has been on our circle when we had our shift of who we were with our diagnoses. What has that looked like for you in your life?
I think interesting. I think it's been, I think I've been equally welcome with people being like, that's amazing that you're embracing this identity. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also been welcomed by people being like, why are you almost like admitting defeat? Like, why are you accepting that you are a sick chick? And where I'm at now, like, I don't have any advice per se on like how to navigate that. I'm currently living in it, on some people being super supportive and some people not being as supportive. What is your advice on that?
Gosh, I don't know if I have good advice on it either. It's one of the hardest parts about being sick, in my opinion, is you're already battling physically, mentally, and emotionally and spiritually. And so is your circle.
Right.
So to remember that maybe they're at a different stage in the grief process, and the acceptance process is important to do, but also to remind yourself that like you're the one going through this. Right. You're the one that's fighting. And if certain people in your circle can't get it, it's either do I need to decide to educate them and pull them to where I am, or it's we're going to keep it super surface level.
Right.
I have people in my life that won't say the word cancer or won't say the word autoimmune because they think if they say it, that's so. And that works for them and what their mental capacity is. But it's hurtful to me. It's hard to not have that support and to be able to have the space to feel how I'm feeling. And I think maybe what I have failed to do is communicate that. And be direct and say, my mindset has shifted, my identity has shifted, and I really, really need you to shift to be in my corner.
Right.
I don't know if that's helpful at all.
I think that was helpful. I think what you're saying about some people not even saying those words, like saying cancer or saying autoimmune, it feels like, they're like, if I don't say it, then it isn't true. Like, this person doesn't have that. I actually just thought of, you know, in Jurassic Park where there's like that dinosaur
Yes.
that they're hiding from, and they're like, they're like, if you don't move, it can't see you.
Yeah.
Like it kind of feels like that, where people are just like, oh, don't say the word. It'll just like, it'll make it more real, or it'll give it space to live on.
Yeah.
And sorry, like I haven't gone to med school, but that's just like not how these diseases work. Like they're not just going to go away if you don't talk about them.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
And I think it causes a lot of tension and
yes.
friction. And it's crazy because it's like when you are the patient, when you are the sick chick, it doesn't really matter whatever the fuck someone else thinks about if you're sick or not. Because compassion and empathy is showing up for the person for where they are. And if you're not there, then get there. Figure out how the hell to get there.
Yeah.
So, what has that been like in your life?
It's tough. I think I have a lot of days where I feel I carry guilt. And because I am someone who is so I won't say I'm chronically ill, but I'll say I'm chronically a people pleaser.
Yes.
So like I've done that my whole life. And so
we'll accept that one.
Yes. Is there a placard for that?
You can have a bell for that.
It's hard. I feel a lot of guilt. I feel a lot of shame. And
around not accepting it or being sick?
Around being sick, and then having people wanting me to be sick in the way that they view that I should be sick.
Damn, that's the fucking truth. How you just said that.
Yeah. Like I feel guilty for not being able to be the version of sick that they have in their minds.
Yeah. How do you deal with that?
I'm struggling. I'm really struggling through it. I think I have really good people in my corner, and those people are what's keeping me going right now. Yeah. I think people, you know, these people are reminding me that this is like a time in life where like I come first, and
I love
that should be. I love you too.
That should be enough.
Like that should be enough,
and it is enough.
Yeah. So I'm, you know, having those people around and reminding me what I know is the truth, that I'm number one right now. Like the biggest priority is my health. And a therapist once told me that, you know, she said, you have to put on your oxygen mask before you help others.
Yeah.
And I remind myself of that I'm only as good as my health, in that sense, that I'm only as, if I can't be healthy and, you know, manage my spoons and manage my health, then I can't help anyone do anything.
And how you manage your spoons and how you manage your health also is your decision. And there's a lot of people in the peanut gallery, always, for everyone, even in our freaking comment section, saying, well, you should do this. You need to be trying this. And none of that matters. All that matters is that you feel okay at the end of the day, that you are doing what you can and reminding yourself it's 80-20. You're a human and you're getting through this and you're trying your damn best. And it's okay if you have slip days and you don't manage your spoons correctly. It's okay if the identity shift is in angry mode or in depression or denial. It's okay.
Right.
We're doing a lot on the inside of our bodies right now.
Yeah, like this is really heavy stuff, right? Like this is not, it's not just like, oh, like I have the flu or I have COVID, or you have an accumulation of things going on in your body, and like they all are interacting together and making things, you know, more difficult for you. And yeah, the goal should be to manage your spoons and prioritize things that are important to you, and let the peanut gallery kind of like fade off.
Absolutely. Which is easier said than done, of course. When it's constantly in your ear, it's really hard. Right. And I think that's where those feelings of guilt or being a burden step in.
Yeah.
Especially if you are a chronic people pleaser like us.
Right.
I remember growing up and having autoimmune days, big flare-up days,
Right.
that would last 24 hours. And I had a big fear that if I was sick one day and I went into school the next day and I looked completely fine, no symptoms,
Right.
no one would believe me.
Right.
Or people would have another reason to think I was exaggerating or whatever.
Right. Or making it up.
And I think at that time I was like, okay, then I have to look sick in a certain way. And looking back now, I'm like, oh, sweet little Alex, you don't have to look sick in any way. You can have a no flare day and use a disability placard because you're conserving spoons for a rainy day. That's okay.
Right.
You can cry on top of a hill because you are going through it and it sucks right now. That's okay. You don't have to be sick. You don't have to be healthy. You don't have to be anything in any way other than the way that you feel okay with yourself.
Right.
So how do we do that? I think we talked about hope a little bit on this episode.
Yeah.
Where do you pull hope from and strength from?
I think for me, my North Star. Okay, so I have 2 North Stars.
I love
does
that.
Can you even have 2 North Stars? That doesn't make sense.
You can have whatever the fuck you want. It's your own identity.
Okay, so North Star number 1 is God. So in my hardest moments, in my worst pain days, those, almost 30 days I was in the hospital, like God was my North Star. That was what was getting me through every single day. North Star number 2 is my family, specifically my parents. And having the combination of family and God, like that is what gets me through every single day. And in my low moments, I pray, I call my family, and that's what helps me get through those days.
When you open up to your family about those days, how do they respond to help you lower those feelings of being a burden, feeling guilty, that you need to show up in a certain way? What are like some of the things that they say, or how do they help you in those moments?
I think the biggest shift for them and how they provide support for me has been that when I call them and if I'm crying on the phone or if I'm, in a lot of pain, so they allow me to sit in the pain.
Yeah.
They sit in the trenches with me. Sadly, sometimes they will also cry because I think they feel guilt that they can't, 1, be physically present with me, and then 2, can't help me.
Yeah.
Can't fix it for me.
Yeah.
And so I think them showing up in that way has been the most helpful for me. And for that, I'm like super grateful. Like, I think it's like, I've realized I need people in different aspects of my life to show up for me in different ways. So like I've, got a great team of doctors, right? So like, that's who I go to for like my pain advice. And I have, friends that are chronically ill. And so we'll talk about holistic things that we can do to manage pain and anxiety and all of those. But for my circle, I need just like the sitting with me.
Yeah. I think that is beautifully true. I think when there's like the saying of like compassion, empathy, and sympathy, and what those 3 things mean. And when you're going through a hurdle in life that isn't health, sitting in the muck isn't productive. When you are chronically sick, and as you said, it's a marathon, that is productive. Even with any kind of health. I remember texting you after last week's episode and I said, thanks for sitting in the muck with me.
Yep.
It's the only thing people can do, I have found, that makes you feel not so alone.
How has that changed for you over the years? Like, has it always been that's what you needed from people?
I think for a lot of years, probably because I treated this all like a annoyance, my circle also did. During hard days, they'd show up and sit with me or whatnot, but I don't think they wanted that identity to be accepted either. Mm-hmm. And when I got diagnosed with PAN, that's when things shifted, because that was scarier, to be candid. It was a lot scarier.
Right.
It felt like there was a possibility many times that I wouldn't make it out. And so sitting in the muck became ever more important. Yeah. And so FaceTime, I am incredibly grateful for. I think there's been days where I call you and I just cry. There's days where I call my mom and I just cry. There's days where I sit on the couch and Cooper holds me. And that to me is more powerful than someone coming and trying to fix me.
Save the day.
Yeah. Sometimes we don't need the day saved. Sometimes we just have to get through the day.
Right.
I love you.
I love you, honey.
I had someone reach out to me recently and say, hey, what are the ways that people can support someone that's going through something like this? And I said, you kind of have to pick your lane. It's emotional, spiritual, or physical. Physical is like you go and clean out their pantry, you cook them food, you clean the house for them, you drive them to appointments, you are there for the physical needs and demands.
Right. Right.
Spiritual is exploring it together, I think. Encouraging one another, being accountability partners for meditating like you and I do together. And emotional for us, I think, is sitting in the muck. And I hope, if anything, that people can send this episode to their circle to really understand that, like, that's all I think we want, because it makes us feel more understood and not so alone. And those are probably the two hardest aspects of being sick.
Absolutely.
So those are kind of the three lanes. And what can be really hard is when someone isn't in one of those lanes or is actively going against one of those lanes.
Yeah.
What's been your experience with that, and how do you handle those lovely humans?
I feel like that's like the golden question. I think people do operate outside of those lanes, and sometimes it feels like they're driving the wrong direction in that particular lane. And I think when you're sick, it's really difficult to be the person that has to educate other people. I think at times it feels overwhelming and frustrating that, you know, on top of your chronic illness, you have to do the educating. But that being said, I think it's so important to communicate to people that your needs are not being met or you're not being supported in the way that you need to be supported. I think you have to give people that opportunity to correct and find a lane for themselves. And the end goal, I think, for everyone around you is that they do want to be supportive.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they don't know that they're doing something that's not helping you. And so I think, you know, step number one would be to communicate. Step number two, I think, would be this community. So send across this podcast, send across this episode to people in your life and say, like, I think this may help articulate how I'm feeling.
Absolutely. That's the hope.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing harder than feeling the burden that you have to do that. We've talked about it so many times during different relationships in our life. Like, why do I have to be the one that's putting in this effort? Why can't they just show up for me in the way that I need? And it's just like, it's just not that easy, because everyone comes with their own baggage about what being sick is, what it's like, and what it should look like. I think, like, one of the harder things is when people try to, like, force that onto you. Like, I'm not going to treat you a certain way. I'm not going to show up for you in a certain way. And those cut so much deeper than I think we're willing to probably to claim or really own, instead of just listening and asking. So I think, like, as a caregiver in a circle, like, one of the most important things is being curious and asking instead of assuming that your way is the best way, even though you have good intent. Like, it's just, if that's not where the person is that's going through it physically, you've got to shift if you love them.
Right. I ultimately think, like, the right way is what the person who's sick, like, their way like however they need to be supported or cared for, like in those moments, like that is the right way to do it.
I totally agree, because that way will inevitably change over time as we move
Correct.
through the grieving process, as we move through
Right.
the identity shifts. It's not a forever to be depressed. It's not a forever to feel like a burden, but it can be in certain moments. And just being there for that person and sitting in it and saying, how can I love and support you best right now in this chapter in this season is critical.
Right. Absolutely.
It's hard to find the words though when you're tired. And we're always fucking tired.
Seriously. I think the seasons thing is important. I think that's definitely something that, you know, in my identity, I am starting to understand, is that it's not everything will last forever. So good moments and bad moments, right? So it's sitting with someone in their bad moments will inevitably get them to the good moments that you want to get them to. Totally. But you have to sit there to get through it.
It's kind of like what you said last week about how we feel like we're being selfish sometimes when we prioritize ourselves to take care of ourselves. But ultimately, that's actually better for everyone else, because then they get the best version of you. I think it parallels to like physically taking care of someone. Right. If you can sit with them where they are and meet them where they are, the growth and change will happen. And it'll be so much more better and more beautiful, and your life will be more full. But it doesn't happen overnight. And there's a lot that we carry being sick that's unsaid. So one of the things I would love to talk about is like the silver linings of how these new identities have kind of changed us and shifted who we are. I've found that I was not a patient person before I was diagnosed with vasculitis. Actually very impatient, I would say. I am very patient now, because I know that the marathon is real. Yes. I've learned to be a lot more compassionate, to know that there's a story and baggage behind everyone's response and reaction.
Right.
And I've also gotten a voice, which I did not have before, because I was a chronic people pleaser. I'm still recovering from that. But finding your voice and being able to put boundaries up is huge. And it's changed my relationships with so many people now, having those things in mind.
Yeah. How has it changed it? Like I'm assuming, hopefully for the better.
Yeah, totally for the better. Trying to think of a good example of a boundary. I've got a good one. So when I was first diagnosed, I was 24, 25, and I still had a lot of like drinking friends from college that I said were my best friends. And when I put up a boundary of like, I'm not going to be doing that anymore, I think it came across as I was being judgmental or something like that, which was not the case. I just physically couldn't show up like that anymore. And putting that boundary had a loss of some friendships, actually like a lot of friendships. And it made space for amazing new friendships of people that really care and want to show up for me in the way that I need. And so the hardship of being chronically ill has also produced some of the most meaningful, deep relationships I have ever had in my life.
Right. And there's something truly beautiful about, I mean, if those friends were able to be with you in that journey, in that phase of life, right? In the college, like fun partying phase, and then also transition into this adult phase of, you know, you're having challenges with your health, like that would have been beautiful. But if they're not able to be, it opened up space for you to let new friends in and let new relationships in. And it sounds like those have been more meaningful almost to you than prior.
Absolutely. Have you experienced that in your chapters?
I don't think so yet. I don't think I've had a huge shift of, I think I've gotten a lot closer to some people. Mm-hmm. I think, and I think this is a function of, you know, me getting diagnosed as an adult, like later on in my adult life.
Yes.
So I think the friends that I already had are kind of the friends that they're here for the ride.
Yeah, totally.
And so those friends have shown up and they continue to show up. I think I do have some relationships where I feel that people could show up more, but I also know that people are going through their own stuff, right? Like everyone is going through something. I think one of the big takeaways I've had, like on top of boundaries, is empathy, like increase. I think I've always been an empath.
Yeah. I would say you've always been an empath.
I think it's definitely like 10x of what it used to be. I think I very much believe that like people are on their own journey. And so just because, you know, I have stage 4 cancer doesn't mean that someone else's journey and difficulties are less important. Like that's what they're going through. And you can't really, I think my takeaway is like, you can't blame people for not having issues. Like they're only dealing with what they've been dealt. And if they've had a nice, I'll call it privileged in the sense of like, it's a privilege to get to your 30s, 40s, 50s and not have had health issues and not have lost someone to health issues. And so if you've made it this far and you don't know how to provide support or be there for someone who's going through it, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't hold that against people.
I think that's beautiful because I think it's really easy, especially in the first years, I'll say, of diagnosis, to hold like resentment towards people that aren't showing up in the way that you need. And I love that you already have that perspective of giving people grace and also the space to grow and to change.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, where I'm at currently, I'm just establishing my boundaries. I'm establishing what I need support to look like and communicating that. And, you know, I'll continue to communicate it. And I think that's all I can do right now.
I think it is too. And I think that that's a ton.
Like, that's all, folks.
That's all, folks. That's a full day's work.
And on that note, I think that's been a good conversation, Alex. I think that was really, I don't know, I feel like that was a good therapy session for me personally. And
you can Venmo me back from last week.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was good. I think, you know, the identity of being a sick chick is changing. It's going to continue to ebb and flow. And I think just knowing that, I think the biggest takeaway that I had from today is that it's a marathon. It's not a race. And we have to continue to give ourselves space to evolve and change and give those around us that same grace to evolve and change and support us.
Absolutely. Well, I love you, Biz. And I love you guys.
Love you. We love you. And we are, we'll be here next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Not So Sick Chicks. Remember, new episodes drop every Monday.
Subscribe and rate 5 stars. And of course, send this to a friend who is a sick chick trying to be a little less sick. We're all in this together.
Follow us on socials at the Not So Sick Chicks.
And we'll see you next week.